My dear precious soul, we are gathered in spirit today to wrestle with an old question wrapped in new clothing. A question whispered in the hush of poverty, shouted in the halls of doubt, and pondered in the quiet corners of the faithful. What's the point of tithing? There comes a moment in every soul's journey when the questions arrive heavier than the burdens we already carry. The kind of questions that don't shout but sit in silence, that don't knock but settle into the bones like a cold wind. One such question is this: why should I give when I have so little? That question is not born from stinginess, no. It is born from hunger, from struggle, from the aching ache of trying to do right while walking barefoot across the shards of life. You feel the weight of bills stacked like monuments to your labor. You see the zeros dance in your bank account like cruel jesters. You listen to the preacher speak of abundance while your pantry sings emptiness. And so you ask, not with bitterness but with trembling hope, what is the point of tithing? Let me speak to your heart now, child. Let me pull you close with words drenched in the wisdom of suffering and the tenderness of faith. You must understand, tithing is not a transaction. It is not a bargain you strike with the Almighty. It is not an exchange like buying bread at the market or trading coins for favor. No, tithing is trust made visible. It is the sacred act of saying to the universe, though I do not see the full harvest, I will plant my seed anyway. It is standing in the shadow of lack and declaring, still, I believe. Tithing is not about how much you give, but about how much you believe. Some folks have turned it into a business, a spiritual stock market where you invest and expect returns. But heaven does not trade in percentages. The kingdom of God is not a bank. The Lord is not an accountant looking for your receipts. No, my dear, the Lord is a lover, a redeemer, a restorer. And what he wants from you is not a fee, but your faith. When you give your tithe, you are not paying God. You are proving God. Not proving him right or wrong, no, but proving, through your own trembling, beautiful self, that trust can be louder than fear, that obedience can be stronger than doubt, that love can be greater than logic. Now let me say this gently, for I know the path has been hard. Giving when you're already empty is not easy. It is not glamorous. It is not always rewarded in ways the world can measure. But when you tithe, you are stretching your soul. You are telling the storm, you may howl, but I shall still sough. You are telling the famine, you may linger, but I shall still give. That kind of faith, it moves mountains that men cannot see. When I was a young woman, I didn't always have a name people remembered. I didn't always have words the world applauded. I didn't always have $1 in my purse. But what I had, what I chose to have, was trust. I tithed with more hope than certainty. I gave when it made no sense. And in return, I did not always receive money, but I always received meaning. I did not always receive things, but I always received truth. And sometimes, child, that is the greater blessing. You see, when we hold tightly to what little we have, thinking it will sustain us, we forget that it is not the bread that keeps us. It is the baker. It is not the water that saves us. It is the well. Tithing reminds us who the source is. Tithing says, God, I trust that what you gave me was enough for both my living and my giving. Do you see it now? Tithing is not about the tenth. It's about the trust. And let me go deeper still. Sometimes, your tithe won't be money. Maybe you've given your last coin. Maybe your purse echoes with the sound of nothing. But you can still tithe your time, your kindness, your encouragement. You can still walk to the bedside of a lonely soul and sit silently loving. You can still write a letter of hope. You can still pray for someone who has forgotten how to pray for themselves. That, too, is tithing, because giving isn't always about wallets. It's about willingness. Oh, beloved, do not let the world fool you. Do not let guilt or manipulation twist this sacred act into a scheme. God does not demand your paycheck. He desires your posture. The posture of a heart that says, I give because I love. I love because I trust. I trust because I know who holds me. When you tithe, you're not only giving to a church or to a cause. You are giving to your future. You are writing a love letter to tomorrow saying, I believed before I saw, I planted, before I picked. I trusted before I touched. And the God who sees in secret, oh yes, he will reward openly. Maybe not with gold or glitter, maybe not with mansions or miracles, but perhaps with peace that passes understanding, with strength to endure the storm, with joy that dances in the middle of despair, with purpose that no thief can steal and no fire can burn. So the next time you feel that ache, that tightness in your chest, that wrestling between holding on and letting go, remember this tithing is not a purchase. It's a proclamation. It says, I am not my own provider. I am not my own God. I am not the source. I am the servant. And when the servant gives in faith, the master responds in mercy. So give. Not because you have extra, but because you have enough trust to let go. Give not because someone told you to, but because your soul whispered, this is how I love my Lord, with open hands. And when you give like that, when you trust like that, when your tithe becomes your testimony, oh baby, you will never be the same. You will walk taller. You will pray bolder. You will love deeper. Because you will know it was never about the money. It was always about the faith. Discipline, my darling, is not a punishment. It is a promise, a sacred rhythm you make with your own breath and bones. And devotion. Oh, devotion is love in its most determined form. It is not always sweet. It is not always loud. But it is always steady. Now when you bring tithing into the marriage of those two, discipline and devotion, you begin to carve out a heart that beats not for the world, but for the one who made the world. Tithing, you see, is not simply the dropping of coins in a basket or a tap of digits on a screen. It is a quiet schooling of the soul, a classroom where the heart is taught how to bow, how to release, how to trust without trembling, how to stand tall in sacrifice. And that lesson, it ain't easy. We live in a world that tells us to hold tight, save more, keep for yourself, watch your own back. But tithing says, let it go, give it up, trust that you won't go without. That, my dear, is discipline. That is spiritual muscle. To give not once, not twice, but faithfully, whether the sun shines or the rain pours, is to walk in a kind of obedience that shakes the heavens. You learn something about yourself when you commit to giving regularly. You learn that your emotions don't run your spirit. You learn that your fears don't make your choices. You learn that your devotion has more grit than glitter, that it is made of fire and sweat, not just song and sermon. When I think of tithing as discipline, I see a young mother, her apron damp with work and worry, still folding a few bills into an envelope. I see the elder in the back pew, living off little, but giving off much. I see the man who lost his job, yet still places $1 in the plate with trembling fingers and a bowed head. That, beloved, is devotion. That is discipline. That is worship without fanfare. Discipline is choosing the path again and again, even when it no longer feels magical. Even when no one applauds. Even when the blessings don't look like you imagined. Devotion is returning to the altar not because you expect a miracle every time, but because you remember the miracle he already made in you. Now don't let anyone fool you into thinking tithing is about legalism. It's not a law to trap you. It's a ladder to lift you. It's a practice that aligns your inner world with God's eternal rhythm. Just as the sun rises on cue, and the stars take their place without fuss, tithing trains you to move with divine order. It brings a kind of holy structure to your walk. Let me tell you something, sugar. Anything worth building requires discipline. You want a strong body, you train it. You want a wise mind, you read and reflect. You want a peaceful home, you tend to it daily. And if you want a soul rooted in God, you give not just when you feel inspired, but especially when you don't.
Oh, yes.
Especially then. Because that's when tithing transforms from duty into devotion. That's when it becomes less about dollars and more about dedication. You're saying, God, even when my heart is heavy, even when I can't trace you, I will still trust you. I will give what is yours, not because I'm trying to earn your love, but because I'm responding to it. And there's power in that child. There's beauty in the becoming. Because while the world looks at the amount, God looks at the attitude. While others see money leaving your hand, heaven sees chains falling from your spirit. The discipline of tithing breaks you from the tyranny of self. It sets you free from the god of greed. It pulls you out of the pit of pride. That steady act of giving, week after week, month after month, is like a sacred drumbeat in your life. And just like the drummer keeps time for the dancers, your tithe keeps your soul in rhythm with grace. You begin to move differently, speak differently, live differently. Your heart, once frantic with fear, now beats in faith. Your mind, once obsessed with scarcity, now dreams in abundance. Your soul, once shackled to survival, now walks in serenity. It is not the money that did it. It is the discipline. It is not the ritual. It is the repetition. Because what we do repeatedly forms us deeply. And tithing, when done from the heart, forms in us a spirit of reverence, a posture of humility, and a habit of holy trust. And don't forget devotion. Oh, devotion is the fragrance that lingers after the giving is done. It is the secret smile you wear when no one's looking, because you know you're walking in obedience. It's the warmth that kisses your soul when you give in silence and service. You see, the beauty of tithing is that it sanctifies the ordinary. It makes holy the habit. It takes what could be mechanical and turns it into melody. It's not always glamorous, no. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it stretches you to the edge of your comfort. But that stretch, darling, is where the growth lives. So tithing becomes your training ground, your proving place, your gymnasium of grace. You show up, you give, you trust, and slowly, gently, powerfully, you become not just a giver but a worshiper, not just generous with money, but generous with mercy, generous with kindness, generous with love. And isn't that the goal? To be shaped into the likeness of Christ, to be poured out like oil on the altar, to become a living offering. That's what tithing does. It doesn't just move money, it moves you. It doesn't just touch your wallet, it transforms your will. So give not just from duty, but with delight. Let your discipline dance with your devotion. Let your habit be hallowed. Let your giving be grounded in grace, because each tithe is a testimony, a brick in the altar you're building with your life, a whisper to heaven saying, I may not be perfect, but I am present. I may not have much, but I give with meaning. I may stumble, but I still trust. And I promise you, sweet child, the God who watches over sparrows and knows the number of hairs on your head, he sees your gift. He knows your heart. He honors your offering. And in due time, oh yes, in due time, he will return to you not just what you gave, but what you became through the giving. Trust, my dear, is one of the most delicate and daring dances of the human soul. It is not easy to trust, not with your heart, not with your story, and certainly not with your money. Trust asks you to hand over the keys, to unclench your fists, to believe when everything in you wants to build a wall and protect what little you have left. But oh, what glory there is when trust is complete, when trust is full, when trust walks hand in hand with love. And tithing, beloved, is trust made visible. It is a quiet confession that says, God, I don't just talk about faith, I walk it out. It is standing on the edge of what feels like not enough and saying, I trust you anyway. Tithing is not a test of wealth. It is a mirror that reveals the depth of your trust. Because anybody can give when the pockets are full, and the bank account sings a joyful tune. But what do you do when the oil runs low? When the cupboard echoes back at you? When all you have is hope, wrapped in $1 and a prayer? Do you still give? Do you still trust? That, my darling, is where the mirror doesn't lie. You see, tithing is not about making God richer. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. He stretched out the stars with his fingers and poured the oceans with a word. No, tithing is not for him to gain. It is for you to grow. It is for you to come face to face with the question, do I believe he'll take care of me? Not just when things are fine, but when things are fragile. When you give that tithe, you are saying, I believe God can do more with my 90% than I can do with the whole 100. That is trust, sugar. That is faith rolled up in courage. That is love without conditions. I've seen people give in silence with no applause, no recognition. I've watched a grandmother, wrinkled and worn, place a folded bill in the offering plate like she was laying down gold. I've watched a single mother, unsure of next week's groceries, still give because she believed her God was greater than her grocery list. I've seen a man who lost everything in the fire still write a check with shaking hands and tears in his eyes, whispering, Lord, I still trust you. That's when the mirror of trust shines brightest. Not in ease, but in uncertainty. Not in the harvest, but in the famine. Tithing shows us what we believe when no one's looking. It's not for performance. It's for purification. It washes away the layers of self-sufficiency and reveals the raw, unfiltered truth that you are leaning not on your own understanding, but on the everlasting arms. Oh yes, tithing humbles you. It brings you low in the best way. It makes you say, this is yours, Lord. I only had it because you gave it. And once you realize that every good and perfect gift comes from above, the act of tithing becomes less of a chore and more of a celebration. It is your heart's way of saying, thank you. Not just for what's in your hand, but for the very breath in your body. People talk about trust like it's easy, but true trust is costly. It costs your pride. It costs your logic. Sometimes it costs your comfort. Because trust doesn't always give you a map. It gives you a promise. And that promise says, I will never leave you, nor forsake you. That promise says, give and it shall be given unto you. Not always in the same form, not always in the way you expect, but always in the way you need. So when you tithe, you're not just making a donation. You're making a declaration that says, my hope is not in money. My hope is not in man. My hope is in the Master of all things. And child, that kind of hope doesn't disappoint. That kind of trust doesn't crumble in the storm. That kind of faith builds an altar out of ashes. There are times in life when you will be tempted to withhold. When fear whispers, hold on to what you have. It might be all you'll ever get. But remember this. The God who provides the seed is the same God who brings the harvest, and he cannot bless what you refuse to release. Tithing is the hand opening. It's the heart unfolding. It's the soul surrendering. And in that surrender, trust is born. Tithing reminds you that God is not your last resort. He is your first response. He is not a backup plan. He is the blueprint. And every time you give, you are anchoring yourself not in economy, but in eternity. Trust says, I don't know how, but I know who. Trust says, even if I walk through the valley, I will fear no lack. Trust says, I have never seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread. That's what tithing brings out of you. Not just generosity, but grit. Not just faith, but fire. It chisels away at the stone walls around your heart and says, let God in. Let go of control. Let him write the story. And honey, when you do that, when you give from a place of pure trust, you don't just change your finances. You change your foundation. You begin to build a life not on sand, but on the solid rock. You begin to see provision where there was once only pressure. You begin to experience peace that makes no earthly sense. That is what trust does. And tithing, beloved, is one of the purest mirrors of that trust. So give not to impress, but to invest. Give not to earn, but to express. Give not to bargain, but to believe. And when you look back, weeks, months, years from now, you will see a thread of faithfulness woven through every gift, every seed, every sacrifice. And you'll say, "He kept me," every single time. There is a whisper in the wind, soft but persistent, that tells you, if you give, you'll go without. It creeps in when you hold your purse a little tighter, when your hands hesitate over the offering plate, when your heart calculates risk instead of remembering grace. This voice is old, child. It's as old as fear itself. And it is wrong. Because giving, my dear, is not losing. It never was. We've been taught by the world that to give is to subtract, to part ways with something you might never get back. The world tells you to clutch and to count, to store up and stack high until your barns are bursting, even if your soul is starving. But let me remind you of a higher truth, one not written in spreadsheets or etched in gold, but carved into the very breath of Scripture. And it shall be given unto you. Giving is not losing. It is sowing. It is planting. It is laying down something small in hope and picking up something mighty in faith. Oh yes, beloved, there's a difference between what you see leave your hand and what God intends to return to your life. And if you measure your giving by loss, then you've misunderstood the language of heaven. I've walked with people who gave their last and smiled through the giving. I've watched folks tithe with trembling hands and found peace resting on them like morning dew. They didn't look poorer when they gave. They looked freer. You see, giving breaks chains, not just chains around your money, but chains around your mind. It teaches you that your security was never in the dollar, but in the divine. There is power in parting with what you love. There is courage in releasing what you worked so hard for. Because when you give, you're saying, "This doesn't own me. I belong to something greater." You're loosening your grip, not because you're careless, but because you're fearless. The act of giving shifts the posture of your soul. You stop standing in defense and start walking in dependence. You stop hoarding for a rainy day and start trusting the God who parts the clouds. And that, child, is not loss. That is liberation. You cannot give with an open heart and not be changed by it. You cannot sow into eternity and not see heaven rain down on you in ways you never expected. It may not always come in dollars. It may not come in checks or coins. But it will come in peace, in joy in open doors and closed wounds. Giving stretches your spirit like a muscle. And Lord, how strong you become when you give in love. We live in a world that praises accumulation but forgets about abundance. There's a difference, you know. Accumulation is what you can count. Abundance is what you can't measure. When you give, you tap into that immeasurable grace, that overflow of goodness that pours out when you least expect it. You move from being a reservoir to becoming a river. Ever flowing, ever nourishing, never stagnant. And don't let anyone fool you into thinking that the tithe is a tax. No, it's not at all you pay to enter heaven. It is an invitation to participate in the divine economy where scarcity doesn't rule and lack is not your final name. It is your opportunity to declare, I may not have everything, but I have enough to bless someone else. Do you hear the shift in that thinking? Giving doesn't say, I have extra. It says, I have enough. And that is where miracles begin. I've known mothers who gave in the middle of lack, fathers who tithed with bills in their back pocket, elderly saints who lived on fixed incomes, yet every Sunday placed something sacred into that plate, not out of abundance of resources, but out of abundance of trust. These were not people who lost when they gave. These were people who found freedom, favor, and fulfillment in ways that money could never measure. When you give, you join a lineage of givers, of widows with jars of oil, of shepherd boys with slings, of a Savior with outstretched arms. None of them had much, but they gave what they had, and what they had became more than enough. Child, the truth is, nothing given in love is ever lost. You don't lose when you give. You live. You live in a spirit unchained by greed. You live in a place of gratitude, not grasping. You live with hands open to heaven and feet firm on purpose. Now, let me speak to the fear, because I know it too. The fear that says, what if I give and nothing comes back? That fear is real, but it's not righteous. The God who watches the sparrow never forgets the seed. Every act of obedience echoes in eternity. Every tithe, every offering, every quiet gift that no one but God sees. It matters. And hear me when I say the return may not be quick, but it will be sure. Because God is not a debtor. He does not owe us, but He honors us. He honors the giver, not just the gift. He honors the heart that says, Lord, I give because I trust, not because I want to trade. You see, the transaction of heaven is not one for one. It is pressed down, shaken together, and running over. It is overflow, not overdrawn. So give not out of fear, but out of freedom. Give not because you're forced, but because you're full. And the beautiful thing is this. When you give, you become like the one who gave it all. You mirror the generosity of your Maker. You reflect the light of a God who loved so deeply. He gave His only Son. Now that, my dear, is the ultimate proof that giving is not losing. So let the world count their coins and clutch their pearls. Let them measure worth in wealth. But as for you, you know better. You know that every time you give, you gain. Maybe not in ways the world understands, but in the currency of peace, joy, and divine provision, you are rich beyond measure. And isn't that what we're truly after? Not just to survive, but to thrive. Not just to have, but to help. Not just to collect, but to contribute. So, give boldly. Give beautifully. Give as one who knows that every seed planted in faith grows into a harvest of blessing. Because giving, sweet soul, is not the end of your resources. It is the beginning of your reward. There is a change, a quiet revolution that begins not in the bank account, not in the pastor's ledger, but in the soul of the one who gives. Yes, baby, the most profound miracle of tithing is not in what it builds around you, but what it rebuilds within you. And oh, how glorious that transformation can be. Tithing, when given in trust and truth, does not merely move money. It moves mountains inside the spirit. We are not born generous. We are born grasping, clinging to what we can touch, to what we call ours. As children, we fight over toys. As grown folks, we fight over titles. But something holy happens when a person decides, I will give back to God what is already His. That decision is not about wealth. It is about willingness. And it unlocks a transformation that no therapist, no teacher, no preacher can quite manufacture, because it is done by the divine Himself. The soul that gives begins to expand. Slowly at first, then suddenly, like a flower unfolding after the rain. Tithing breaks the dam of fear and lets the river of faith flow freely. The moment you say, Lord, I will trust you with this tenth, is the moment you begin to untangle yourself from the vines of self-reliance and walk into the garden of surrender. And what a beautiful place surrender is. The tither doesn't just cleanse the wallet. It sanctifies the heart. It uproots pride, tears down the idol of control, and whispers, there is more to life than what you can hold. And don't we all need that whisper, every now and again? Don't we all need that reminder that the hands that give are stronger than the hands that hoard? Tithing teaches discipline. Not the kind of discipline that binds, but the kind that frees. You learn to live on less and yet have more. You find contentment in sufficiency, not in surplus. You come to see that what God leaves in your hand after the tithe is far more powerful than what you would have kept without it. Why? Because now your hand is blessed. Now your heart is in alignment. Now your spirit walks in obedience. I've seen proud men humbled by the quiet act of giving. I've seen women afraid to let go of what little they had, only to discover they had more than they ever knew. Because something shifts when you tithe, not in your paycheck, but in your perspective. And Lord, how much richer life becomes when you no longer measure it by what you have, but by what you can release. You start to look at your income not as yours, but as an offering. You see your home as a sanctuary, your job as a mission, your life as a testimony. And child, that is a transformation that shakes heaven. You are no longer a collector of things. You become a vessel for purpose. Now, I'm not just talking about dropping a few coins in a plate on Sunday. No, that's not it. I'm talking about the kind of giving that stretches your soul, that makes you pray over your bills and praise over your bread. The kind that makes you say, God, I trust you more than I trust my budget. And when you give like that, oh my dear, you grow. You grow in ways that money can't measure. You grow in patience. You grow in trust. You grow in kindness because you know what it is to give when it hurts. You grow in compassion because you've walked the road of sacrifice. You grow in gratitude because every meal, every light switch, every warm coat feels like a miracle. That is the transformation of the tither. You begin to walk lighter, talk gentler, love deeper. You stop competing with your neighbor because you know your blessings are tailored just for you. You no longer fear tomorrow because you've learned to trust the one who holds it. It changes how you pray. You stop asking only for things and start asking for strength. You stop begging for more and start blessing what you already have. You see your resources as rivers, not ponds, meant to flow, not to be fenced in. And when you live like that, you start to look like Jesus. You start to live like someone who believes in resurrection, not just from the grave, but from lack, from scarcity, from selfishness. The tithe becomes your declaration. I am not afraid. I am not owned by what I own. I am free. And isn't that the goal of faith? To be free. Free from the bondage of greed. Free from the grip of fear. Free from the myth that your worth is measured in wealth. The world may not understand it. They may call you foolish. They may say, why would you give away what you could keep? But you, child of God, you know better. You've seen too much. You've lived too long under the weight of mine, 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 to not recognize the liberty in letting go. Let them talk. Let them count their coins. Let them miss the miracle. But as for you, keep giving. Keep tithing. Keep trusting. Because every tenth you give is a hammer that chips away at your selfishness. Every offering is a wine that fans the flame of your faith. And every moment of obedience draws you closer to the kind of person God always intended you to be. Not a taker, not a hoarder, but a giver. A joyful, generous, spirit-led giver whose life is a sermon and whose heart is a sanctuary. You may never see your name in lights. You may never hold a fortune. But if your tithe transforms your soul, you've already received the greatest treasure of all. And that, my dear, is wealth beyond words.